What is up, everybody? Star Wars Dad back for another video. Today we're going to be looking at one of the new leaders from Twilight of the Republic. This is Count Dooku Blue. So I've messed around with a few of these leaders so far, and I even messed around with Count Dooku Green, but it was just kind of lacking the ability to sustain and survive against really aggressive decks. But this deck has felt really strong. So, if you haven't read much about Count Dooku, Count Dooku does an incredible job of cheating cards out in this deck with droid tokens and separatists and exploit abilities. So this deck is absolutely going to redefine the format. You have the ability to play Malevolence, Separatist Super Tank, and Gore all on your third turn, which is absolutely insane. Depending on the matchup, any one of those choices is always going to be good, but I would say depending on the matchup, you might want to keep a specific card. Now, there's definitely some matchups where you don't want to get rid of all of your units to play a giant unit on turn 3. Like decks that have Waylay, for example, is going to be, you're going to play a different strategy, but the good thing is this deck has ways to play around that and answers for that. What's crazy even is that if you play, you have to have the right, very specific cards to make this happen. But if you get droid deployment turn 1 and then you get droid deployment turn 2, you can literally play Malevolence or Separatist Super Tank on turn 2. Again, that's why I had that other 1-drop in here, because it made it a lot easier to make that happen. But again, it's, you're almost overcommitting, because if your opponent has any kind of interaction to mess that plan up, then you're potentially leaving yourself vulnerable to more aggressive decks that just start to play into killing your droids to slow things down. You could take out the wartime trade official for another 1-drop there. I think would be what I would do if I was trying to pull off that on turn 2 more often, just to have more 1-drops, to be able to have more units. Because another thing you could do is just play Poggle on turn 1 and then play Obedient Vanguard and the other 1-drop on turn 2 to still have 1 resource left, so that you would have a total of 4 droids with 1 resource left. But it's definitely very possible. So let's kind of get into it. I'm going to try my best to explain this and try to show some examples on Force Table with how the deck works. So the first card in here is Obedient Vanguard. It's a 1-drop. There is another 1-drop. It's a spaceship that was a Separatist too, and I had it in here for a while as just like exploit fodder, but it just kind of felt way too weak, and I chose to put in removal to be more balanced and took it out. It's really nice, to add in that extra 1-drop just to be able to pull off those turn 3 plays even more consistently, to have enough droids out there and separatists out there to exploit and get those big units out. But it's almost like you're putting all your eggs in one basket with that approach. And like I said, there's certain decks that are just, they have Power of the Dark Side or they have Waylay, and you're just like, well, I just did all that for nothing. So you don't always want that to be your strategy, although it is amazing. Like against Sabine, absolutely. Like, why not? What are they going to do if you put an 8/8 out there? But Obedient Vanguard is really sweet in here. So there's a combo that card has with Droid Commando, the 3-drop. So as long as you have an additional droid out, which is incredibly easy to do in this deck, you sacrifice the Obedient Vanguard, and then you can play the Droid Commando with Count Dooku's ability for 1 resource, and then the Droid Commando will trigger and give a trooper plus 2/2 when it dies. So you make the Droid Commando a 6/5, and then you do this on turn 3 when Sabine flips, and you can swing in for 6 damage and immediately kill Sabine. It's also good against Boba, because you could just use another droid to finish off Boba. But Droid Commando is very good. The fact that you can play it for 1 resource as a 6/5 is insane. There's a lot of really cool combinations of cards and things that you can do in this deck that just make this deck so much fun and very competitive. Admiral Motti is going to be one of the cards that is a little different, but it just fits so good for the exploit that whenever you sacrifice it to an exploit card and you're playing Malevolence or Separatist Super Tank, you can immediately ready those units, which is huge because those units don't have like ambush abilities. But if immediately coming in and being active to either swing in for damage to close the game out or just to kill a thing is really awesome. Gore doesn't need that, so if you're sacrificing Admiral Motti for Gore, Gore's still getting to ambush in and get in for overwhelm damage. It would be really nice if it had black in it so that you could ambush it in and then attack with it again. That would be insane, but unfortunately that doesn't work. But it's still good enough in here to warrant the need for it, just to be able to attack immediately with Malevolence to gain life, or just Separatist Super Tank and just swing it with an 8/8. The Wartime Trade Official is just kind of like good because it's a good, like, I have 2 of them in here, and it's just good because when it's defeated, it creates another token. So you just, in this deck, you just constantly want to have units on the board, so that you can play your exploit abilities, and also just so you can benefit from the Kraken, which we have 3 of, because that's another win con is just to go extremely wide with a bunch of droids, and then use Kraken when it's on attack ability and just swing in and give every friendly token plus 1/1 for the phase. So that's really cool too. Confederate Courier is a space unit, it's a 2/1, and again, when it's defeated, you create a token. So another just really good unit that just allows you to continue to have units on the board. So even if you use Confederate Courier to exploit a unit out, you're still getting another token to continue to do that if your bigger unit is killed somehow. So it just creates, like I said, like this continuous swarm of tokens that just don't go away that easy, and it just continues to allow you to cheat things out with your exploit abilities. And it's just like you're not really losing anything when you're killing, you know, either Wartime Trade Official, Confederate Courier, or even the Battle Droid Escort. When you kill any one of those, you're still getting another token out that you can use as fodder for the next turn, or as something you can attack in with Kraken's ability. So there's a lot of cool things there. Poggle the Lesser is a 2-drop that comes in as a 1/4. It's a great turn 1 play. There's a lot of great turn 1 plays in this deck, which is really important to the consistency. So a lot of if you get the Poggle, a lot of your best play would be like either like Battle Droid Escort on turn 2, so you can create 3 tokens as soon as it comes into play because of the Poggle's ability, or like a droid deployment plus like an Obedient Vanguard, so you could play like literally 4. You'd get 4 tokens there, so you'd have 5 tokens on turn 2, which is absolutely insane. So that just makes like plays like Malevolence or Super Tank or Gore so easy to pull off on turn 3 if you want to. So like I said, some games you're not going to want to. Some games you're going to want to be a little slower. And that's another issue that I was having with Green, is Green did not have the Calculating MagnaGuard, which is very, very good Sentinel. So it comes in immediately as a Sentinel, as a 3/4 on turn 2. And then anytime one of your units dies to like an exploit ability, or just dies in general to an attack, then it becomes a Sentinel again. So it's just like really sweet how you can like cheat things out and then create a Sentinel to protect the things that you cheated out. And that was definitely what the green color was missing. I mean, you could have put like the Phase Dark Trooper in there, but then it's not a Separatist unit. It is a droid, but that was kind of where I was struggling with. And then just not having ways to gain life was definitely a problem with the green version. Clone Wars is really sweet. It's a really strong finisher. So basically, when there's like, let's say there's 7 resources out there, you can create 5 2/2s, and your opponent will get 5 1/1s. But again, your deck is built to benefit off of having that. So the great thing about exploit too is that you can attack in first. So you can attack in with all these tokens, and if you're not worried about any of them dying, then you definitely want to attack in. If you need them to stay alive to be able to pull off the exploit ability, then you don't want to do that. But Clone Wars is really good. It's just it's not as great early game, but it's more of a late game card, and it's really good against, like, I would say, against control or decks that are just that have a hard time dealing with you going wide. I do think like Bloodsport and Bombing Run and Unlimited Power and all those kind of cards that are just spreading damage are going to be hard for this deck. But then again, when you're playing against those type of decks, you're going to alternate how you play the deck. And that's what I like about it. You can pivot your strategy and be more methodical and not just be going as wide against a deck that has a lot of board wipes to deal with you. Droid Deployment is a very good turn 1 play. Just immediately play 2 tokens on turn 1. I play that card a lot on turn 1, especially if he goes into like Battle Droid Escort, and then you immediately have 4 tokens by turn 2, so that you can pull off your turn 3 play if you want to. Again, the Calculating MagnaGuard is really, really good, or MagnaGuard. A Droid Commando, like I said, it's insane. If you have the Trooper, it's still really good just to ambush in for 1 resource when you sacrifice a droid as a 4/3, just anytime. What's cool about this deck is you can do something like that and still play like a Separatist Super Tank on the same turn if you have enough droids. Like you could use Count Dooku's ability, play Droid Commando for 1 resource, and then if you had like 3 other resources, you could still play the Super Tank and just defeat 3 droids, or even defeat the Droid Commando with Super Tank's ability of Exploit 3 and just immediately play an 8/8 after that. So like there's some really sweet things you can do in here. One thing that I did recently was I played a Malevolence for 1 resource by sacrificing 4 droids, which is very easy to do. Malevolence having Exploit 4 is just absolutely amazing. And then on the same turn, I played a Barrage. So I sacrificed 4 droids, played Malevolence, made something get -4/0 for the turn, then played Barrage and wiped the board at 6 resources. That's just crazy. Just the fact that I didn't even have that card on the board and then still was able to play a Barrage in the same turn. Like that's a nutty thing to be able to do in a deck like this. 2 Vigilance is, like I said, we needed some life gain, and sometimes, just having that ability to pay the 6 cost, gain 5 life is fine when we have those big units to our advantage. And sometimes we just need to kind of catch up and slow things down. Malevolence is very important against aggro, and that was one of the biggest impactful cards, as well as the Calculating MagnaGuard, in just consistently beating the crap out of aggro, which was definitely a problem with green because you didn't have that. And Malevolence having Exploit 4 is just insane. And it was just, that card just really takes this deck over the top. A couple of takedowns just as an alternative way to deal with things. If in case we don't have the right combo of things. Against those aggro decks, if we could cheat out Malevolence, Super Tank, or Gore on turn 3, then we go into Barrage on turn 4, and we just completely wipe the board and win the game. That is just an absolute amazing thing about this deck that you can do. I mean, you're clearing the board for 9 to 10 damage on turn 4 with a Barrage, and you're just picking off everything. Gore is such a fun card to play, because it gets Exploit 4 with Count Dooku's ability on turn 3, so that's how you're able to play it on turn 3. The fact that it ambushes, overwhelms, and then becomes a Sentinel right afterwards is just nuts. Such a fun card, and I just can't wait to play that card more consistently. Like I said, Malevolence is really, really good. The Super Tank is really awesome if you have the Admiral Motti as one of your exploit targets, which, again, so if you have enough tokens out, because the Super Tank already has Exploit 3, right? On turn 4, let's say you had, 3 tokens out, right? Maybe your opponent killed one. So on turn 3, you're at 4 resources. You could still play the Admiral Motti, then play Count Dooku's ability, sacrifice all 4 of your units, including the Motti, still play the Super Tank, and have it active as an 8/8 on turn 3. So there's a really cool thing, because you're playing it, when you exploit it for 4, you're playing it at 1 resource. So you can have an active Separatist Super Tank at 1 resource to swing in for 8 damage on turn 3. That's just crazy good. And then you follow that up with a Barrage. There's no way your opponent can survive that. This is where cards like Waylay and Power of the Dark Side are going to be absolutely extremely important. There's that new black card too, which I think was necessary. It's a turn 3 card where your opponent sacrifices a unit and you sacrifice a unit, but if you don't have a unit, it doesn't say that you have to have a unit. So that helps a lot of black decks have an answer if they're not playing blue. So a lot of those green-black decks will be more, have a good removal spell. So I mean, yeah, your opponent has to have an answer, or else, I mean, you're swinging in for 8 damage and then following it up with a barrage. Like, that's good game. So there's a lot of like that potential of just taking over the game. But the cool thing is, even if they kill that, right, you have so many ways to immediately just fill your board up with tokens again. You have droid deployment, battle droid escort. You have the Clone Wars. You have the Kraken, which is so sweet. When it's played, you create two tokens, plus you get the Kraken. So you're creating 3 units. And that's so strong in this deck. Now the sideboard, like, that's still a work in progress. Like, if you need, I just put a bunch of cards that I wanted, like, that had Separatist synergy in here, like with the invasion of, I can't even read what it says, it's too small. The consolidation of power card, potentially. But, there might be an argument that you still need to play, like, Relentless or something for the control decks. But I think that's still a work in progress. But so continuing on, Barrage, of course, is absolutely amazing in here. It just gets even better because of how much power you're pulling out before you play Barrage on curve. Kraken, of course, is an alternative win con because you can just, if you have just a wide board of tokens, Kraken on attack just makes all your tokens stronger. So, I mean, especially if you've played Clone Wars and you have Clone Troopers tokens, then they become 3/3s. So let's say you have 5 of those, and you're swinging in with a Kraken the following turn. You're swinging in for, 15 damage plus the 2 2/2s that Kraken made for 19 damage plus Kraken itself, so 21 damage. So Kraken can really just swarm the board and take over, and that's a good answer for control, just to rebuild your board, is Clone Wars and Kraken, as well as Droid Employment and Battle Droid Escort and Poggle and all these other things. A couple Rivals Fall just to have another way to deal with big leaders. I mean, you're playing blue, you might as well play one of the best removal spells in the game and just have an answer for leaders that become difficult, as well as just really, really powerful units later in the game. I play 1 Admiral Trench, and this might need to be a second copy in the sideboard, but I'm just, again, the sideboard is a work in progress, but 1 in the main board feels right. So you can play it at Exploit 2 with Count Dooku's ability, or even if you flip Count Dooku, which you're probably not, you can play Admiral Trench at 3 cost to return up to 3 units that were defeated from your discard pile to your hand if they were defeated that turn. So that's really sweet, like for a board wipe, especially like, later in the game. That's going to be really impactful, just to get back 3 units to your hand and then do it for a cheap cost if you have droid deployment or something like that to play in front of it. But just seems like a sweet card. Just, again, this is early testing, trying to figure everything out. But it did feel good in testing. I originally had a second copy in the sideboard. I think I just started to put more removal, but again, I think that might be worthy of a second copy. But I do like Palpatine's Return as well, so I'm not sure. The 3 Malevolence I spoke about, the Separatist Super Tank I spoke about, and the 3 Gore I spoke about. In the sideboard, I just wanted to, again, this is a rough draft on the sideboard, but just 3 Power of the Dark Side for more early removal, especially because if decks like this are going to be more prevalent, 3 Power of the Dark Side is going to be really important against those type of decks, so that if they sacrifice their whole board to play a Malevolence against you, you have an answer with Power of the Dark Side in case you don't have that same curve that they have in the game. So it's just a really strong answer. Vigilance again for aggro decks. Palpatine's Return, I think, for control, just to bring back your strong units. And I think even like there's probably a sweet play where you could Palpatine's Return a Trench back and then get 3 more units back into your hand. So that could be cool. The cool thing about that too is like getting back units that create droids, like Battle Droid Escort or some of these other units that when they die they create tokens, or even Poggle. Just units that like help you go wide if going wide is better over like playing the giant unit, or even like 1 giant unit plus going wide so that you can cheat it in whenever you need to. I just think Admiral Trench has a lot of cool possibilities. But I do think Palpatine's Return will be good. Consolidation of Power is where you count up all the power of the cards that you have on the board. So this can be good for cheating out things as well. Like if you have, and this might need to be like a one of in the main board potentially, but it's just a card I need to play around with more to decide if it needs to be in the main board. But yeah, this deck is just a lot of fun. You know, I love the potential this deck has. Obviously, this is just the first iteration of this list. I'm sure there might be some more cards to add to it, or some changes to be made, or things that are discovered, but I really do love how you can just kind of come out of nowhere and just blow up the board, or just even with the Admiral Motti synergy and kind of just swing for damage out of nowhere after you've attacked in. You know, swing for damage with Malevolence or Separatist Super Tank out of nowhere. Gore can do the same thing, just kind of, you know, you attack in with 3 or 4 units, and then out of nowhere you just bring in a Gore for 4 resources, blow up your own board, and then overwhelm their board. Just really fun, just a lot of power. I'm sure there's going to be some changes that make this deck to fine tune over the next couple months, but definitely a lot of fun. Again, I hope some of these little videos were helpful and just kind of helping you understand some of the really cool plays you can do in this deck. But definitely let me know what you guys are starting to come up with, some of these new leaders. I do think this is the coolest one I've figured out yet. I've messed around with some of the other ones. I haven't had much success, though. This was the first one that I felt like, okay, this is good. So, and it just, the fact that you have the ability to cheat things in out of nowhere, to activate Motti, just the barrage synergy, Droid Commando swinging in for 6/5 for 1 resource to kill a thing is amazing. Gore is such a fun card. Malevolence is such a fun card. The Separatist, because it already has Exploit 3, and the Malevolence because it already has Exploit 4 before having to do anything. That's just crazy. So yeah, it's gonna be a good one. But as always, y'all have a good one.